Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today I thought that I would talk about putting too much pressure on yourself, because this is something that I've realized I'm starting to really do, or that I have done in the past, and just in the past month or so I've kind of noticed it on myself. And so I've been trying to take steps forward to not put so much pressure on myself and just really understand the importance of it. So I just kind of thought that I would talk about that today, because I know I'm not the only one that definitely puts too much pressure on themselves. There's, you can put pressure on yourself in so many different aspects of your life, whether it be work, school, relationships, personal. We put so much pressure on ourselves for so many different things, and a lot of the time we don't realize that we're putting that kind of pressure on ourselves, and then eventually, it's kind of like a ticking time bomb. Eventually we're just gonna kind of explode or break down, or and it's definitely okay to, when you have a lot on your plate, it's okay to be overwhelmed, and it's okay to, be stressed out a little bit. That's normal, but you can't be to the point where you're putting so much pressure that you're putting tear on your body, your mind, and then to the point where you kind of just break down and can't take it anymore. And so I just thought I would talk to you about putting too much pressure on yourself. I'm gonna go over some behaviors that you kind of reveal if you put too much pressure on yourself, and just certain aspects that kind of come from putting too much pressure on yourself. And then of course we'll jump into some tips and tricks on how to not put that kind of pressure on yourself and just go through your journey the way that you should. Because we all have goals and standards, and it's so good to have ambition and drive, and I think people with when people are in different places of their lives, especially sometimes they're just really, really focused on their career at this time in their life, or they're really, really focused on, their relationship, their family, or their schooling, or whatever the case is. Sometimes we kind of get into overdrive when we have this goal in mind, or this big idea that we really, really want, and we kind of sometimes just have tunnel vision to just that. And it's anytime not going after that goal is a waste of time, and that's the mindset that we kind of have to try to get out of. And I'm guilty of this too. I'm always go, 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 go. But I need to learn to, take a step back and breathe and just enjoy the ride, because beating yourself up for mistakes, or beating yourself up for, having an off day where you don't get much work done or something like that, it's only going to set you back. Putting that too much pressure on yourself just adds stress. It's not actually good for you at all. When we're piling on all this stress, like I said, eventually we're going to break down and we're not going to be able to handle it anymore. And so when we're going after our goals and our dreams, and we have that ambition and drive, it's so great, but you have to be able to enjoy the ambition and drive, and enjoy the process going after your dream. It's not just about the end goal, it's about the journey. And I'm sure you've heard that so many times, and I'm sure I've even said that so many times, but it's true. We're supposed to enjoy this journey. All the pressure of the go, go, go is going to lead you to that breakdown, and we all strive for perfection. That's just kind of how, we all strive to be the very best. And of course we want to go up to our capabilities, but we can't, there's no such thing as perfection. So stressing ourselves out because of this perfection that we think that we're going to obtain, it just doesn't make any sense. There's that blind, we're blind to the flawed logic and striving for absolute perfection, because that's not fun. Like, going after your goals and, like, only doing that for, like, X amount of months or, like, years or whatever it is, like, what's the fun in that? Even though no matter how much you enjoy, you know, what you're going after or what you want in life, it's not fun to just be focusing on that one thing for so long periods of time, right? Like, we have to learn to give ourselves breaks and, you know, get out and experience. And, you know, we actually create way better ideas. Our mind we're just way healthier when we actually just get out and experience, get out of our heads, you know, get out from behind the computer, or, you know, just go for a walk outside. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to, you know, go take a trip or, like, go out and party or something like that. You can just, like, go for a walk and, like, you know, experience outside, go for a new walk, go for, like, a new drive down a different area around your house or something like that. That's what I always do. I'm like, you know, if I just, like, need a break, I just, like, hop in my car and, like, go for a little drive. I'm still new to where I'm living, so, like, driving around is, like, still kind of really fun, because I just, like, see new places, and, like, I live in a beautiful area, so it's just, like, driving around, it's like, like, this is nice, and then I'll get out of my car, and I'll go for a little bit of a walk, and, you know, just get some fresh air, and then I feel, like, rebooted and, like, rejuvenated to, like, get back to, like, what I need to do. But it's just so crucial to, like, take that break. But when we're putting so much pressure on ourselves, it's like, we don't have time for a break. Like, that's how our mind works. Right? It's like, I don't have time for a break. I don't have time to go for a drive or a walk or go hang out with friends and blah, 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 blah. And, like, trust me out of everyone, I get it. I do this. I've done this lots of times. But we have to break that cycle and break that, like, mindset and just take the time to ease off of everything and just breathe, because piling on that pressure, it's only going to set us back. You know, we're only going to feel stressed out. We're only going to feel worried and anxious, and yeah, maybe we're getting a lot done, but is it really your best work if, like, you're not letting yourself breathe a little bit? If you're doing all of it under stress, like, especially if you're doing creative things, it's like, it's not going to be your best work if you're sitting behind a computer screen for 12 hours a day just typing away or whatever you're doing. Like, you have to get out and, like, do things and relieve that pressure on your back, right? And just move and, you know, get creative outside your body. But because we learn by making our mistakes, and so if we put so much pressure on ourselves and then it doesn't work out and we fail or we make that mistake, you know, that's really when we put the pressure on ourselves. It's like, I put all this time in, you know, I did all this work, like I should have done this, and you're just like, you kind of hanker down on yourself, and it's not healthy, you know. But we actually are learning from those mistakes, but, you know, we kind of block that learning by adding all the stress and pressure from a mistake. You know, if we never failed, we would never be able to absorb that information and absorb that lesson and that experience, and, like, we would never be able to, like, grow from it later on and become better. And, like, you know, the next time that you go after it, you know, you're going to be that much better, you're going to know that much more, and you're going to feel that much more confident going into it. And so making a mistake and failing is great. Like, it sounds terrible, but, like, it really is. It's great. Like, fail, make mistakes, you know, pick yourself back up and keep going and learning from it and experiencing it. But when you have, like, all that pressure, sometimes you actually end up making more mistakes, you know, because you're not, you know, quite, you know, in your zone. You're not feeling like completely yourself because you have all this added stress, all this added pressure, so you're actually not really doing your best work, and then that's when you might actually slip up and make mistakes. You know, when we have that tunnel vision and that tunnel vision towards your dreams, you don't see the flaws in striving for that pure perfection of, like, 24/7 work, because you're just not giving yourself to breathe. You're not giving yourself time to live. And, like, I think part of the scariest thing about putting all that pressure on yourself a lot of the time is not realizing how much pressure you really are putting on yourself until it's too late. And, like, people can tell you all the time, it's like, take care of yourself, be careful, blah, 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 like, all this stuff. And it's like, I, like, personally struggle with this. People are always like, make sure you're taking care of yourself, make sure you're taking breaks and you're doing that. And it's like, I know. Like, I am, right? And, like, I get, like, you have to understand, like, the outside perspective looking in, too, right? You might not see how much pressure, how much you're doing, and then someone kind of calls you out for it, and you get angry almost, you know, you get frustrated. You're like, I am taking a break. And it's like, are you, though? Because your short temper is really bringing that. Like, you have to kind of trust outside perspectives as well, because we don't always see how much we're piling on top of ourselves, and we don't see how that's affecting us. And, you know, our family and friends and the people that are close to us can have that outside perspective and see that, you know, they can see it better than we can see it. And even though it can be really, really frustrating to listen to that sometimes, we have to, because with all the added weight, we're just unable to see, you know, we're blind to that flawed way of thinking, you know, oh, I have to go after my dream, I have to get this. And like, I'm all about like buckling down and like going after it and like putting the work in, but like we have to find a balance between, you know, putting the work in and going after what you want, but also like living while you're doing it. Like, and I've like heard so many stories, people are like, oh yeah, like I'm in school, I'm just like a little hermit, or like I really want this new job promotion, like I'm just focused. And I think that's great, and I think all the hard work is going to pay off eventually, but you have to enjoy that hard work, and you have to learn to, you know, breathe outside of it and to live outside of it and still go after your dreams, because you're never going to be able to sustain that work ethic if you're always go on top of yourself, like constantly. We got to breathe. We got to let go. We got to enjoy the entire ride and the process that we're going through. Okay, it is time for a little bit of a break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back, I'm going to jump into some behaviors that reveal if you're putting too much pressure on yourself, just some more tips and tricks, kind of how to get out of it, and just more things that you can recognize if you are putting pressure on yourself, because like I said, sometimes we need an outside perspective to show us kind of that we are putting too much pressure on ourselves. But I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, so stay tuned.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Let's jump right back into all this information about putting too much pressure on yourself. So I have 5 behaviors that reveal that you're putting too much pressure on yourself, okay? So if you recognize any of these, you might be putting too much pressure on yourself. So number 1 is letting your failures stop you from trying. You know, failing is perfectly normal and healthy. It helps us grow, like I've probably said in almost every single episode of this entire podcast. We have to put in high level of work, dedication, and, you know, perseverance to achieve our goals and go after what we really want. I think that, like, that's great. We have to put the work in. You know, we can't just snap our fingers and get what we want. So we're going to fail. You know, we have to sometimes try a million different things to really get, you know, what we really want out of it. And we're going to fail. You know, you can't be perfect at anything. Like I've said, like, you can't strive for perfection. Like, there's such a flawed way in thinking of, like, striving for absolute perfection. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You know, true success requires a level of skill taking. You know, you have to live out of your own comfort zone, like out of your own limitations. Like, if you set yourself up in, like, within these limitations, like, you're never going to achieve what you really want to achieve, you know. And if you set these limitations because you're too scared to fail, you know, or, like, literally you set these limitations because you're too scared to fail. So you're holding yourself back from even trying, from, like, even going out of that limitations, going out of that comfort zone and, like, just going after it. Because failing is nothing to be ashamed of. But we even subconsciously set ourselves these, like, limitations because we're scared of failing. So we're like, I'm just not even going to bother trying. Like, I'll never be good enough for that. You know, and that's too much pressure on yourself to, like, have to be perfect all the time. And then we automatically make those limitations. We automatically stay in our comfort zone because, It's like, this is where I'm comfortable. This is where I strive. This is, what I'm good at. But don't you want to be good at more than just those, things that you already know you're good at? Like, don't you want to learn more things about yourself and, be confident in other areas of your life? So if your failures are, the fear of failing is stopping you from even trying, you're putting too much pressure on yourself. Number 2 is you don't think you're good enough. This kind of goes hand in hand with the failing one, of course. We're our own worst critics. Failing to give ourselves the love that we give others. That's the thing. Like, we would never criticize others the way that we criticize ourselves. And our society can kind of run on negativity sometimes. We can run on the judgment of ourselves and others. Think of it this way. Like, there's so many companies out there. There's so many, like, different things out in our society right now that would not be running, that would not be kind of what it is if it wasn't for negativity. And of course, negativity is a part of life, but think of, like, the beauty industry. And, like, the beauty industry would completely fail if people didn't think that their appearance was flawed, right? So just because, think about it. If people didn't think their appearance were flawed, they wouldn't buy all these beauty products, you wouldn't be getting your hair done and all these facial things and all this makeup and your nails and anything, right? Like, you would never be doing that if you didn't think your appearance was flawed in some way. Or maybe you just like doing it, but you know what I mean? And it's like, that would fail, and it's running on a flawed system, on negativity, right? So just because, like, society and, like, these things can run on the negativity and negative judgment doesn't mean that you should be constantly beating yourself down. We have to love ourselves and be proud of who we are. And, like, of course we have to criticize ourselves so we can keep pushing and keep getting better and better and improving and growing. But we can't just never think we're good enough or anything. So it has to start with loving yourself. So yeah, if you never feel like you're good enough, you might be putting too much pressure on yourself. Number 3 is you feel stressed out or overwhelmed literally all the time. Some stress is normal. It's normal to care. It's normal, to want all your work to go somewhere and to do something. Like, you're putting so much time and effort into this one thing. Of course you want it to go somewhere. Of course you want it to be worth your while. But what's really worth your while is the journey of getting there. All the things that you learned to your goal. It's not the end goal that's really the achievement. It's how you handled yourself, how you did it, all the information that you learned going up to it. So if you're constantly stressed out and constantly overwhelmed, is it really worth it? All this time that you're putting into your goals and dreams, like, of course you want something out of it. We all do, but you should not be so stressed that it's all you think about. You can't be constantly overthinking or making yourself feel physically ill. I find when people are so stressed out, you get ill, you get sick often, you feel really run down, you have no energy, maybe you stop eating, or maybe you overeat, your body gets sore, tired, you get the cold or the flu. Like, these are all just things that happen when we put so much stress and overwhelm on ourselves. So if you're literally constantly stressed, constantly overwhelmed, constantly, like, you're never checking off your to-do list, you might be putting too much pressure on yourself. Like, we have to practice being gentle with ourselves. Okay, number 4 is you have unrealistic expectations. And when you don't meet these unrealistic expectations, you become very, very hard on yourself. You beat yourself down for your mistakes, for failing, whatever they are, right? We all let ourselves down sometimes, and that's completely normal. But we have to set realistic expectations for ourselves. You can't just assume that you're going to finish this massive project in a week, or that you're going to, get here in X amount of days, or whatever it is. Like, we have to give ourselves time, and we have to be patient with ourselves, especially if it's something new. And, when we're going after our dreams and our hopes and all these different things, we have to be patient. It's a learning process, right? Like, we're learning and we're growing and we're going after it. So if you have unreal expectations, you are going to be letting yourself down. And then you're putting too much pressure on yourself to achieve these things that just can't be achieved in the time that you wanted, or it's just unrealistic, right? And so, I think it can be hard too when someone, you are your worst critic, and when you are going after a certain goal, it can be hard to decide if you are having unrealistic expectations. And, I think there's it depends on each person, kind of where you set your unrealistic expectations. It depends on your project or whatever you're doing. But you have to kind of reflect that on yourself and see, how you're feeling about it. And if you do honestly think that they're unrealistic, you got to set the bar down, because if you're constantly striving for something that's just out of your reach, you're going to be putting too much pressure on yourself. You're going to run yourself down, and you're going to disappoint yourself in more ways than you should have. Okay, and number 5 is you always want more. We all want more in different aspects of our lives. That's why we're going after our dreams, after our goals. But we can lose sight of all the good things in our lives when we're constantly thinking about the future, when we're constantly thinking about more, what's next, all those positive things, how far you've come. I think when someone is so driven to reach their goals, they can forget to remember, where they started and how far they've come and how much they've grown. And we need to take a moment to appreciate, the point of life that where we're at right now. If you are never feeling fully satisfied with your life, then you're probably putting too much pressure on yourself. We have to take the time to be grateful for everything that we're doing, every little step that you've taken towards your goal. We need to be grateful for that, and just where you're at now. Compare yourself from 2 years ago, or even 6 months ago, even 2 months ago, and really look at it and be like, wow, this is look at the difference that I've made. And this is why I'm so focused on self-reflection and going back and forth, because you actually see your growth, and it makes you appreciate how far you've come and where you stand now. And I think that's so important, to be able to look back and be yes, maybe it wasn't a huge step forward, but it was a baby step, and every step counts. So you really got to take a step back and reflect on these things. Do you recognize any of those things that I listed that you might do, or how you feel? And then how can you fix them for yourself? When we put too much pressure on ourselves, there's so many different things that can happen, and we need to recognize that we are putting too much pressure on ourselves, first of all, of course, so that we can go back and fix it. We can change it. We can change our mindset. Maybe we need a new perspective, a new perception. Sometimes we might need to, set our, it's I feel silly being set your standards lower, but I don't mean it like that. We should always have high standards and have ambition and goals for those standards, but they have to be realistic, and they can't put all this added stress and overwhelm on ourselves because of it. It has to make sense. It has to be realistic. It has to, be aligned with what you want. And, of course it's going to be a big step forward because it's something new we're learning and experiencing, but it shouldn't break you down to the point where you're physically ill. You're so stressed. You're putting so much weight on your back that you just don't, feel like you're going to quite make it there, right? You collapse before you even get to the end. And we have to stop ourselves from doing that. And so we have to stop ourselves from putting so much pressure. Life is really short. We have to enjoy every single step, every single, on our way to our goals, to whatever we want in life. We have to enjoy every single step. So we have to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves. Okay, it's time for another break, but when we get back, I have lots more information for you, so don't go anywhere.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Life and Happiness podcast. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about some things that happen when you do put too much pressure on yourself. Just some more things that you can kind of recognize so that you know how much pressure you're really putting on yourself and how much you need to like take a step back maybe. When you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. You never reach your own standards, and this comes from putting too much pressure on yourself. It's a behavior, right? Or when someone compliments you and you can never take the compliment, you have too high standards for yourself, unrealistic, or too much pressure on yourself, so you can't take the compliment that you're actually doing good. Or, if someone's like, wow, like your work ethic is amazing, it's like, yeah, but I have to. Or, you kind of brush things off or whatever it is. You have to accept the things that people are saying to you, and if you can't accept the compliment, you're putting too much pressure on yourself. If you at least once a week ask yourself, what is the point of all of this? You're probably adding too much stress. You're probably overwhelming yourself way too much. And if you actually have to constantly ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Yeah, it's too much for you. You got to step down. You got to be able to enjoy every single moment. If you have no idea why you hold yourself to such a high standard, and you actually know, so like consciously, that no one else is expecting you to be this perfect, and that you just realize it's your own stupid expectations, you're obviously putting too much pressure on yourself. If you know that nobody would expect you to be that perfect or to go after that or to do, what you're doing, maybe you are putting too much pressure on yourself. You need to take a step back and be like, is this my own stupid expectation? Getting that outside perspective from someone that you know well makes it easier, to kind of see if you are putting too much pressure on yourself, or sometimes other people can see it before you can see it, right? Or if you're naturally good at something, and then you find a million reasons to like never do it again, or to like make excuses for yourself, or like find a way to like pick it apart. You're like naturally good at something, you're like, oh, like I'm never gonna do that again, or like I that was luck, or this, you make excuses for yourself. You can't just like accept that like that was something that you're good at. Another one would be, once you do achieve something that you've put your mind to, your head, instead of celebrating, your head automatically goes to how can you top that achievement. You can't just let yourself enjoy the moment and be happy for what you just did and the success you had. You automatically think, what's next? How am I ever going to top this? Right? And I think that's kind of scary. I think it's great to have that ambition, like, what am I going to do next? But you also really need to enjoy those goals, those moments, those things that got you to where you are now. Or if you actually wish sometimes that you could tamper down your ambition and your drive, and you kind of wish that you could just be happy with like mediocre things, but you just know that you'll never be like that you can never just like settle for like average, but if you kind of wish you could, you're probably putting too much pressure on yourself because you're feeling the overwhelm of the stress and the anxiety, right? Or if you feel envious of your friends when they're going out, when they're having a bunch of spare time, they're living their life. You might feel jealous, envious of them, to have all this freedom, have all this spare time to like go out and do what they want. You're probably putting too much pressure on yourself. If you feel like a moment not working is a waste of time, like you should always be doing something, probably putting too much pressure on yourself, right? Or when people say that you're your own worst enemy, like, has anyone ever said that to you? It's like you are your own worst enemy, and you laugh because it's like, wow, like that's so true. I really am my own worst enemy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that you can kind of just like cliche things, like you're your own worst enemy, you're your own worst critic. It's like, wow, that is true. I really am. And if you really feel that you are your really worst critic, that you really are your worst enemy, you're probably putting too much pressure on yourself. When you really hope that one day all this pressure and hard work is going to pay off, but you're constantly anxious, feeling like it's not going to pay off, so you're working harder and harder and harder, or maybe you procrastinate. Maybe you're the other way of putting too much pressure on yourself. You kind of procrastinate to the last minute, and you just have to buckle down and get all this work done in such a short amount of time, and all that pressure is it's too much. It's like you procrastinate because you're putting so much pressure on yourself that it makes you feel anxious, but then when you actually have to do it, you're adding even more pressure. So it's like, it's double the bad, it's double the pressure, it's double the anxiety, double the stress. We have to be able to give ourselves time and to like take time with everything that we're doing. If you're really aware of like how crazy you sound when you talk about the pressure that you put on yourself, and then you feel even crazier because you know that you're not going to stop. Like if you have a conversation with someone and they're like, wow, like you have so much work, like you put so much pressure on yourself. You're like, yeah, I know, I'm totally aware of it, but like you just know that you're never going to be able to stop, or that you like don't want to even stop. You're like, nah, it's fine. Like I'm fine. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. You need to take a breather. You need to take a step back and just kind of let go, reflect, and see, kind of make your next action plan. So how do we stop all of this pressure? And like I said, we need to I think when it comes down to it, is recognizing that you are putting too much pressure on yourself, taking a step back, reflecting on it, letting yourself really kind of see the areas that you are putting too much pressure on yourself. And then, we have to understand the difference between high achievement and perfectionism. And perfectionism isn't real. Like we can't always strive for perfection. There's such a flawed way of thinking in that. So, you want your high achievement and everything like that, but you can't be perfect 110% of the time. You can't be always go 100% of the time. So we need to find that balance between, being a hard worker and going absolutely insane, going after, the things that you want and your goals. And be your hard worker. Go after your dream. Strive for everything that you want in life. That is amazing. But you can't, put so much pressure and work so hard that you're working yourself into the grave. What do you want to be known for, later on in life? You want to be known for your goal that you achieved? You want to be known for the experiences that you had, the journey that like got you to your goals, like how hard of a work you are. Like that's amazing. I think that's such a great thing to be known for. But what's even better is, being known for being a hard worker, but also enjoying life and like living in the moment. And so sometimes we need to draw the line between leading a full life and just being overwhelmed. And that line can be hard to draw. It can be hard to find it and to like really decide where it is. But once you find that line, your life is going to be so much better. You're going to be way less pressure on yourself. And we have to think like an optimist realist. We got to be positive and real and rational than just like a pessimist, right? Like we need to be real and positive and realistic. Really what it comes down to, be rational and realistic with what you're going after and how much you can handle, and allow yourself to feel. Allow things to affect you, even allow yourself to get overwhelmed and feel stressed and feel that pain where it's like, oh, this is too much on your back, too much on your chest. Let yourself feel that so that you can really understand, okay, I can't do this. Like, it's not good for me to be doing this. And then you're going to allow yourself to feel in the moment and feel happiness and feel alive because you're actually going out of your comfort zone and, you're living too and you're enjoying the journey. And, you got to accept yourself for every single thing that you're doing and accept for yourself for all the overwhelm and the stress, but accept all the moments and the journey and the process to get you to, where you are. And it's just enjoying all the baby steps. So we need to stop putting all that pressure on. We need to find that fine line of leading that full life and that none of us want to be stressed or overwhelmed, and we need to find that fine line. And I think the way that we can really do that is just reflecting on where we're at, really break down our goals into small little goals, don't just go after one huge one, go after some small ones, and I think that's less overwhelming too. And when you have that small goal in mind, then you're not going to feel all this pressure to like keep going. Like I find it's like when you're only focused on like this huge end goal, of course your to-do list is going to be never ending, because that goal is way later on down the road. So if you focus on little goals, it's going to be less overwhelming right there. You're going to feel less, inclined to be working all the time. You're going to actually be checking off your to-do list because they're realistic small goals to get you to your big goal. Well, that is all the information that I have for you today on putting too much pressure on yourself. I hope this kind of made you take a step back, kind of recognize if you are putting too much pressure on yourself in certain areas of your life, and, kind of give you the drive to, the drive and ambition to take a step back and, to enjoy more of the moment, to enjoy your journey, enjoy every process that you're going through, and just really live through your goals, through, the things that you're going after, so you can actually enjoy them more, experience, let things affect you. Okay, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I had an amazing time sharing this information with you. Please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, like and follow us on social media, and leave a 5-star review. It is always greatly appreciated, and I can't wait till next time. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.